Dean Martin was one of a kind. The child of working-class Italian immigrants, this shy, stammering boy grew up to be a boxer, a comedian, a singer, an actor, and everything in between. But it didn't all come easy to the king of cool. Dean Martin faced simmering feuds, rocky marriages, and life-altering tragedies on his road to the top. Let's look back at his journey and find out the real reason behind his vicious feud. He came from humble beginnings. Dean Martin's incredible journey from a shy, stuttering youngster to a versatile icon is truly inspiring. Born to hard-working Italian immigrants, Martin overcame numerous challenges as he delved into the worlds of boxing, comedy, singing, and acting, showcasing his diverse talents. However, amidst the glitz and glamour, his life was also marked by inner struggles, including feuds, tumultuous relationships, and personal tragedies. Martin's path to success was paved with difficulties that left an indelible mark on his early years. Dino Paul Creti, known to the world as Dean Martin, entered the world in 1917 in Steubenville as the youngest son of Italian immigrants. Raised in a working-class environment, Martin's love for music, particularly the drums, blossomed during his youth. Surprisingly, Martin faced severe bullying during his school days, despite his later image as a charismatic figure. His school years were miserable. Dean Martin didn't start speaking English until he reached the age of 5. Before then, his household was immersed in Italian, with Italian being the primary language spoken. When he began attending Grant Elementary School in Steubenville, he found himself in a challenging situation. Being the only one in his class who struggled with English, Dean faced relentless teasing and harassment from his classmates. His experience at school was utterly miserable, which might explain why he didn't stay there for long. School simply wasn't Dean Martin's thing. He managed to make it to the 10th grade before ultimately deciding to drop out for good. Despite overcoming his strong Italian accent and gaining some victory over the bullies, he held the belief that education was a total waste of time. Adding to that, he considered himself smarter than all of his teachers. With that mindset, the teenage Martin ventured out into the world to carve his own path. However, fame and success didn't come knocking on his door immediately. Before finding his way into the spotlight, he had to navigate through some darker paths. He found an illicit career. After leaving school, Martin decided to give working-class life a shot, much like his father, by taking a job in a steel mill. But let's be real. Can you really imagine Dean Martin working in a steel mill? It didn't take long for him to realize that it wasn't the right fit, so he moved on to other opportunities. Unfortunately, these opportunities led him down a darker path, landing him on the wrong side of the law. During the Prohibition era, when ambitious young men like Martin saw opportunity everywhere, he ventured into bootlegging liquor for a while. This not only brought him into contact with some shady characters, but also marked one of the most perilous chapters of his life. During his school years, Dean Martin constantly faced bullies who targeted him because of his accent and speech. It was undoubtedly a nightmare, but it inadvertently equipped him with self-defense skills. Around the time he left school, he ventured into prize fighting under the alias Kid Crochet. This career path resulted in injuries like a broken nose, torn lips, and shattered knuckles, mainly because he couldn't afford the hand-wrapping tape boxers typically used for protection. However, the brutality of the ring was just the beginning. He soon stumbled upon an even harsher means of earning money. When Dean Martin was young, he ventured out on his own and shared a New York City apartment with another Italian man named Sonny King. Their shared dream was to make it big in show business. Fun fact, King later became a lounge singer and an unofficial member of the Rat Pack. However, at that moment, they were simply two young guys struggling to pay rent. Despite their lack of expertise, they both had resilience, especially when it came to enduring physical blows. So, they brainstormed an idea. Martin and King, sharing an apartment, had a rather unconventional side hustle. They ran a clandestine fight club right out of their living space. They'd invite New Yorkers to watch their bare-knuckle boxing matches, ensuring each bout was a spectacle. Night after night, they'd go at it until one of them ended up knocked out. It's hard to believe there weren't simpler ways to earn money, but for Dean Martin, fighting was the path he knew best at the time. Eventually, Martin realized that enduring nightly beatings for a small payoff wasn't the most promising career move. However, he didn't quit. He found where he belonged. Not quite ready to walk the straight and narrow, Dino found himself in a bit of a dilemma. Despite some initial reluctance, he eventually embraced a job as a roulette stickman and croupier, fearing it might expose too much of his background. Yet Dino soon recognized that the world of gambling held more promise for him than boxing ever could. This realization led him to work in an underground casino tucked behind the shelves of a tobacco shop, where he had initially started as a stockboy. Over time, his skills sharpened, and he transitioned to working in local casinos. Eventually, he even ventured to Florida, West Virginia, and Washington, D.C. for lucrative opportunities, earning up to $125 a week at his peak. Jonathan Winters once quipped, "Dino Martini is about the wildest thing I do. That's 'cause I never know what he'll do. Like tonight, all I know is I'm supposed to be a bartender." However, it wasn't until a casual hangout with friends after work that Dino's true talent emerged. Taking the stage at Columbus's Walker's Cafe to entertain his pals, Dino's performance caught the attention of band leader Ernie McKay. Impressed by what he heard, McKay extended an offer for Dino to join the band. Embracing his newfound identity as Dino Martini, he even claimed kinship to the renowned Metropolitan Opera tenor Nino Martini. But Dino's stint with the band was short-lived, lasting only a month before he returned home to Steubenville. He needed a new name. Once again, Dean encountered the same anti-Italian prejudice that had marred his school days. However, his friends rallied around him, offering to supplement his income if he continued singing. Encouraged by their support, Dino returned to Ernie McKay's band. However, fate had other plans when band leader Sammy Watkins spotted his talent and persuaded him to join his band in Cleveland. Dino seized the opportunity and made his debut in Cleveland under the name Dean Martin. Meanwhile, Dean's club performances took on a new persona inspired by Phil Harris, known for his hard-drinking and womanizing image in the late 1950s. In September 1943, Martin inked an exclusive contract with MCA to perform at the Rio Bomar Room in New York City. By 1944, he had his own 15-minute radio program called Songs by Him, broadcast from the Big Apple. Then, in 1946, he signed a record deal with Diamond Records, recording 4 songs that marked another milestone in his burgeoning career. Despite portraying a drinking persona on stage, Martin wasn't naturally outgoing. In a 1967 interview with Oriana Fazi, he admitted that at social gatherings, he often remained quiet because he felt unsure about his English-speaking skills. He expressed, "Everybody thought I was big-headed and stuck up, and I wasn't. I don't know what to say to people." With newfound clarity and determination, Martin was poised for stardom. However, fame came with its own set of challenges, especially in his personal life. Martin tied the knot for the first time at the age of 24 with Betty McDonald, marrying her during his early days as a promising lounge singer known as Dino Crocetti. Together, they welcomed 4 children into the world. However, their marriage was far from a fairy tale. As Dino Crocetti transformed into Dean Martin, their relationship began to unravel. Things took a turn for the worse when a new presence entered their lives. Martin tied the knot for the first time at the age of 24 with Betty McDonald, marrying her during his early days as a promising lounge singer known as Dino Crocetti. Together, they welcomed 4 children into the world. However, their marriage was far from a fairy tale. As Dino Crocetti transformed into Dean Martin, their relationship began to unravel. things took a turn for the worse when a new presence entered their lives. He met someone who changed his life. In the mid-1940s, Dean Martin found himself sharing the stage with a lively young comedian named Jerry Lewis at New York's Glass Hat Club. Martin sensed there was something special about Lewis right from the start. Little did they know, this encounter marked the beginning of a remarkable friendship, as well as a tumultuous feud. Deciding to team up, they debuted as Martin and Lewis in Atlantic City in 1946. However, their first performance was a complete disaster. No matter what Martin and Lewis tried, the audience wasn't impressed. The club's owner even threatened to fire them if they didn't improve their act for the second show of the night. Faced with this ultimatum, Martin and Lewis found themselves brainstorming desperately in a dark alley behind the club. Eventually, they both decided to throw caution to the wind and take a bold risk. Martin and Lewis didn't have the luxury of writing a whole new act before their second show, so they decided to throw caution to the wind and give it their all. Martin belted out songs, Lewis entertained with skits, and they both improvised witty banter throughout the performance. Now, if they were just your average performers, this approach might have spelled disaster. But this was Dean Martin and Jerry Lewis we're talking about. To everyone's surprise, the audience went wild, and from that moment on, their careers skyrocketed. Their impromptu performance quickly turned into a winning formula that took them all over the eastern seaboard. Their journey eventually led them to the prestigious Copacabana in New York City, a significant milestone in their careers. After conquering the Copa, the world was ready to embrace Dean Martin. Martin and Lewis made their television debut in 1948 on The Ed Sullivan Show, receiving an enthusiastic reception from the audience. Both of them were eager to transition their act from nightclubs to television and film, so they enlisted the help of a pair of young comedy writers to collaborate on material. Among these writers was Norman Lear, who would later become known for creating some of the most beloved shows in television history. However, while Dean Martin's career was on the ascent, his marriage was crumbling. His wife didn't appreciate the changes in him. It appeared that Betty McDonald preferred the struggling Dino Crocetti over the successful Dean Martin. The couple divorced in 1949, with Martin obtaining full custody of their 4 children. MacDonald, seemingly uncomfortable with the limelight, retreated into obscurity in San Francisco for the remainder of her life. Meanwhile, Dean Martin's fame continued to soar, and he wasted no time in finding a new partner to share his life with. Although Martin and MacDonald officially divorced in 1949, their marriage had likely been on the rocks long before then. By the time they parted ways, Martin wasted no time in moving forward. He tied the knot with Jean Beager, a former Orange Bowl queen, just months after finalizing his divorce from MacDonald. Jean would prove to be Martin's longest-lasting love, as their marriage endured for nearly 25 years, despite its ups and downs. However, Martin's primary focus at the time was his career, and he was on the brink of entering a new chapter. The year 1949 marked a whirlwind period for Dean Martin. Not only did he go through a divorce and remarriage, but he also made his big-screen debut in the movie My Friend Irma. Although he and Lewis earned a modest $75,000 for their roles, their next move would set them up for immense success. Their agent brokered a groundbreaking deal that granted them the opportunity to produce 1 film annually, giving them full creative control. Furthermore, they secured autonomy over their nightclub, radio, TV, and record appearances. This savvy agreement translated into millions for both Martin and Lewis. It seemed like they were on the fast track to dominating Hollywood, but cracks in their partnership began to emerge. He resented his partner. The onstage chemistry between Dean Martin and Jerry Lewis was undeniable, but behind the scenes, tensions brewed. While Lewis thrived as the comedic force, Martin felt pigeonholed into the role of the straight man. Despite Martin's desire to shake up their dynamic, both Lewis and their producing partner resisted any changes. Martin's frustration simmered, leading to a strained and uncomfortable relationship between the two. The strain on their partnership reached its zenith, exacerbated by scathing critiques aimed at Martin. Critics lauded Lewis as the true talent of the duo, relegating Martin to a supporting role. This perception gnawed at Martin, while Lewis reveled in the acclaim, indifferent to Martin's growing resentment. In 1954, during the promotion of their latest film, Living It Up, an incident occurred that pushed Martin over the edge, marking the culmination of his discontent. Even Dean Martin, known for his cool demeanor, experienced bouts of jealousy, especially exacerbated by critical reception. However, it was the 1954 photo shoot for Look magazine that marked the breaking point. After posing together for the promotional shoot, Martin was shocked to discover that he had been completely cropped out of the final cover, leaving only Lewis. This incident solidified Martin's decision to part ways with Lewis, but there was still one major hurdle to overcome. Despite Martin's eagerness to move on, they still had to complete their final movie together, Hollywood or Bust. Despite their charming on-screen dynamic, the atmosphere on set became tense, with Martin and Lewis refusing to communicate off-camera. The strained relationship raised questions. Was Martin overreacting, or was Lewis being unreasonable? Years later, Lewis would offer insight into the truth behind their tumultuous partnership. It was Lewis's fault. The Martin and Lewis feud has become legendary, and fans have long speculated about who was to blame. In his memoirs, Lewis took full responsibility, acknowledging that his skyrocketing fame in the 1950s inflated his ego to colossal proportions. This led him to treat those around him, including Martin, poorly. Martin's resentment towards Lewis culminated in a heated confrontation during the filming of Hollywood or Bust. Martin's lack of enthusiasm for the project only fueled their already strained relationship, resulting in increasingly bitter arguments. Eventually, Martin reached his breaking point and uttered harsh words to Lewis, severing their partnership for good. Despite the completion of the movie, their personal and professional relationship was irreparably damaged. They officially parted ways in 1956, exactly a decade after their initial collaboration. Lewis might have assumed Martin would struggle without him, but what followed proved otherwise. He found a new partner. Fortunately for Dean Martin, Jerry Lewis wasn't his sole connection in the entertainment industry. He also had another close friend, a renowned lounge singer whom he had met during his earlier struggles in the 1940s. You might recognize him, Frank Sinatra. While Lewis may have assumed that Martin's career was over after their split, little did he know that Martin was on the brink of achieving greater success than ever before. Transitioning from the Martin and Lewis comedy duo to the iconic Rat Pack, Martin found himself alongside Sinatra, forming the core of this legendary group of performers. Joined by talents like Sammy Davis Jr., Peter Lawford, and Joey Bishop, their charisma, sophistication, and witty banter cemented their status as legends in the entertainment world. Feeling the allure of Las Vegas, they were poised and prepared to showcase their act in the famed City of Sin. The Rat Pack and Las Vegas were practically synonymous. Night after night, you could catch one, two, or all of them gracing the stages of the city's glamorous casinos, depending on their whims. Eventually, venues like the Sands went as far as to display Dean Martin, maybe Frank, maybe Sammy on their marquees, highlighting the unpredictability of their appearances. With Jerry Lewis no longer in the picture, Dean Martin flourished like never before. Audiences couldn't get enough of Martin's smooth crooning, his witty banter, and his comedic antics alongside his fellow Rat Packers. However, beneath their polished exterior, the group was more scandalous than many realized. The 1960s marked the pinnacle of the Rat Pack's fame, coinciding with a period of significant societal change in America. Despite their suave image, the group pushed boundaries with their humor, often revolving around taboo topics, such as Martin's supposed heavy drinking and Sinatra's notorious womanizing. Moreover, they weren't afraid to wade into the realm of politics, openly supporting the civil rights movement and boycotting venues that discriminated against African American or Jewish performers. Martin and his cohorts were willing to take risks to pursue their desires, and their boldness paid off in ways beyond their wildest dreams. He took center stage. Having made his mark alongside Jerry Lewis and later with the Rat Pack, Dean Martin decided it was time to venture out on his own. The Dean Martin Show debuted in 1965, embarking on a 264-episode run. However, Martin had no intention of conforming to the standards set by network censors. He opted to improvise each episode entirely, often veering into scandalous territory and liberally sprinkling Italian curse words throughout. While most American viewers found this spontaneity charming, native Italian speakers were incensed, bombarding NBC with complaints. Despite the network's attempts to rein in Martin's behavior, their efforts proved futile. He only seemed to become more unrestrained. Despite the controversies, Martin's immense popularity allowed him to continue with his unconventional approach. In fact, he took it a step further when renegotiating his contract, including a rather unusual clause. He was exempted from attending rehearsals. Since he improvised every show anyway, he struck a deal that allowed him to spend the entire week on the golf course, only showing up for tapings. By this time, Martin had gained a notorious reputation as a heavy drinker, and his on-screen antics only fueled the rumors. However, audiences remained unaware of the true nature of the man behind the persona. His act was all a lie. Dean Martin was widely regarded as America's most lovable drunk. With a glass of scotch seemingly glued to his hand during performances and a vanity license plate proudly proclaiming "Drunkie," Martin embodied the image of the Rat Pack's resident boozehound. However, what many didn't realize was that it was all an act. In reality, Martin was perhaps the closest thing the Rat Pack had to a teetotaler. The drink in his hand on stage was more likely apple juice than alcohol, and he often bowed out early at parties, preferring the comfort of home with his family. Despite this, rumors continued to swirl. Joe E. Lewis, a comedian from Martin's early days, taught him the art of the lovable drunk routine. However, Martin's acting prowess sometimes blurred the lines between reality and performance. His convincing portrayals of alcoholics in movies like Some Came Running and Rio Bravo led tabloids to speculate about his supposed addiction. While these rumors were entirely unfounded, Martin didn't shy away from playing into the speculation. Yet, despite his charismatic persona, Martin had his idiosyncrasies. One such quirk was his insistence on being given a room on the first floor whenever he checked into a hotel, regardless of circumstance. While some may have dismissed this as diva behavior, there was a deeper reason behind the request. Martin struggled with crippling claustrophobia well into adulthood, particularly when it came to elevators, which he referred to as coffins. On one occasion, he even opted to climb 18 flights of stairs rather than take an elevator. Maintaining a certain mystique, Martin's peculiarities only added to his enigmatic reputation, further compounded by the strains in his marriage. For decades, Dean Martin appeared to be on a steady upward trajectory. However, in 1972, he began to experience setbacks. He initiated divorce proceedings with his wife of over 20 years. Just a week later, the Riviera in Las Vegas terminated their contract with him, citing his alleged demanding behavior. At 55 years old, Martin found himself in the midst of a midlife crisis. And what do men in midlife crises often do? They make regrettable decisions, of course. Dean Martin was evidently someone who valued companionship. Less than a year after his first divorce, he remarried to John. And this time around, he wasted even less time. Less than a month after his 24-year marriage ended, he tied the knot with Catherine Hahn, a 26-year-old receptionist at a Beverly Hills hair salon. Their relationship seemed to be a rebound from Martin's most serious partnership. Unfortunately, the relationship between Martin and Hahn didn't last long. They divorced less than 3 years after getting married. Despite this setback, Martin didn't seem to learn from his mistakes. He proposed to Gail Renshaw, a former beauty queen and Miss World contestant. However, it seems he eventually came to his senses, as they called off the engagement before making it to the altar. His boy went missing. Despite his charismatic stage presence, Dean Martin cherished his role as a family man above all else. He had 8 children whom he adored and supported throughout the highs and lows of his career. Naming his first son, with his second wife after himself, young Dino Martin quickly became the apple of his father's eye. Dean Paul Martin, the shining star of the family, inherited his father's talents and more. Like his dad, he excelled in singing and acting. Additionally, he pursued a career in professional tennis and even served as a fighter pilot in the California Air National Guard. Dino brought immense joy into Martin's life, making his tragic end all the more heartbreaking. On March 21, 1986, at the age of 35, Dean Paul Martin participated in a routine training mission over the California desert. During the exercise, his plane vanished from radar over a particularly cloudy mountain range. Despite urgent radio calls, there was no response. The son of one of America's beloved entertainers was missing, triggering a frantic search. Helicopters and planes scoured the mountains for several tense days, but to no avail. Even President Ronald Reagan, a longtime friend of Martin's, deployed the nation's most advanced spy plane to aid in the search. Meanwhile, Martin endured agonizing days at home, consumed by worry and hope, his heart heavy with the dread of his worst nightmare unfolding before him. It was a pain that his dear friend, Frank Sinatra, understood all too well. The loss of Dino was devastating for Martin, but he still had 7 other children whom he cherished deeply. As they grew older, his family expanded with the addition of famous sons and daughters-in-law, such as the Beach Boys' Carl Wilson, actress Olivia Hussey, Olympian Dorothy Hamill, and even Carol Costello, daughter of Lou Costello. Following his son's tragic passing, Martin shifted his focus away from his career and prioritized spending time with his expanding family. However, time was not on his side, and he didn't have much of it left. He received a terrible diagnosis. While Dean Martin may have sipped apple juice on stage, his smoking habit was all too real. In September 1993, doctors at Cedars-Sinai delivered devastating news. Martin had lung cancer and required immediate surgery to extend his life. However, Martin's response was tragic. Perhaps the man he once was, before the loss of his son, would have agreed, but that man was no more. Much to his family's dismay, Martin declined the surgery and accepted his painful fate, which wasn't far off. Retiring from public life in early 1995, Martin spent his final year surrounded by loved ones. On Christmas Day, 1995, he passed away at his Beverly Hills home due to acute respiratory failure. In a strange twist of fate, his last breath coincided almost to the second with the anniversary of his mother's passing, 29 years prior. He was 78. With his departure, Dean Martin, the epitome of cool, would never grace the stage with his smooth crooning again. As we reflect on the extraordinary life of Dean Martin, we are reminded of his timeless charm, unparalleled talent, and enduring legacy. From his humble beginnings to his rise to stardom and eventual departure, Martin captivated audiences around the world with his charisma and unmistakable voice. What aspect of Dean Martin's life or career resonates most with you? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more captivating content.